like to start off if I could. I believe that the job for this committee has been to get the facts out on the table for everyone to see and for everyone to draw their own conclusions. And I think we've done a good job of that. I think we all owe Beth and the OPEGA staff a real thank you for a job very well done. I think this committee's job is going to be done at the end of today, and it's now up to others if anything happens from here. I think a number of us will have a few comments. I'd like to speak for myself on a few points. First, as we look at what happened, I think all 12 of us have approached this by saying it makes no difference at all whether each of us is a Republican or a Democrat. This is the unique nature of this committee, set up to be bipartisan, 6 Republicans, 6 Democrats, and that's how we've approached our work. It also should make no difference in how we review the facts, whether this governor happens to be a Republican or a Democrat, whether his name is Baldacci or LePage or any other name. Third, we're talking about the fact of these events only involving will-hinckley. Others have suggested that we view these events in a larger context of some pattern of conduct by the chief executive. But that is not what our job has been. That was not our mandate, and we have not done that. I also think we need to keep in mind, as I think some have reminded us, that this is done in the context of politics, which is sometimes a rough and tumble sport, and we can't be naive about this. Many people will ask, were any laws broken? But that analysis is also beyond the scope of our work. We haven't looked at that question, nor have we sought any legal opinions on that question. This is not the forum to answer that question. So what have we learned after a rather exhaustive process, which involved numerous interviews, review of many documents, and a full day of testimony under oath? Here's what one person thinks we've learned. That Goodwill-Hinckley needed a new president, that the board undertook a recruitment and application process. As a result of that process, the board decided it was in the best interest of the school to hire Mark Eves, and the board voted unanimously to do so. The board then offered the job to Mark Eves, and he accepted. The chief executive learned of the hiring and was upset by the hiring. The governor believed that Goodwill-Hinckley was making a mistake. He believed that Mark Eves lacked the credentials to be an effective leader of the school. At that point, a number of administration officials, including the acting commissioner of education, a senior aide to the governor, and the governor himself, all communicated to Goodwill-Hinckley that if Mark Eves were hired, discretionary state funding of approximately $500,000 a year might well be withdrawn. That money that the school was depending on would be pulled. Learning of this, the Harold Alfond Foundation became concerned about its own investment in the school. The president of the foundation worried that if state funding were withdrawn, the school might not be able to expand its student population and meet other performance goals. Based on that, the foundation itself decided to reevaluate its own multi-million-dollar financial commitment to the school and communicated that to school officials. Goodwill-Hinckley now found itself in a terrible position. The school now faced the possible loss of state funding and the possible loss of Harold Alfond Foundation funding, both of which could cause the school to default on a bank loan and lead to potential foreclosure on some of its school real estate. In the face of these facts, the board decided to fire Mark Eves. Did members of the administration actually threaten to withdraw the funds? On this question, we have, from my perspective, the key testimony of 4 people. Jack Moore, who is the chair of the board of the school, Rich Abramson, the acting president of Goodwill-Hinckley, Sarah Vanderwood, the school's lobbyist, and Greg Powell, the president of the Alfond Foundation. All 4 of these people are highly skilled in the use of the English language. All 4 of them could not have been more clear in their testimony to our committee. All 4 of them reached exactly the same conclusion, that members of the administration conveyed to them that if Mark Eves were hired, that state funding would likely be pulled at the direction of the governor. I reached this conclusion myself beyond a reasonable doubt. It quacks like a duck, it walks like a duck. I think it's a duck. On top of that, the most compelling evidence comes from the governor himself, who stated in no uncertain terms on television that he had threatened the funding withdrawal. There are those who will say, you're right, that's exactly what happened, but that the governor was completely justified in what he did. That is that it was perfectly appropriate to step in because of his belief that Mark Eves was unqualified for the job of president of the school. I don't agree with that myself for a couple of reasons. First of all, will-hinckley is a private, nonprofit institution. It may receive some government funding, but it is still a private organization. As such, I think they have a right to make their own hiring decisions without fear of interference by anyone, especially someone from the government. There are literally hundreds of similar private entities that receive some state of Maine funding. I worry about the precedent this case sets if this kind of executive action becomes the new normal. Are we entering an era when private institutions will feel a need to give politicians a veto power over their internal hiring decisions? I certainly hope that's not the road we're going down. And this is hardly speculative thinking. I've already heard in the last few months about another private organization that had exactly this concern as it went through a hiring process of its own. The second concern I have is with respect to my colleagues in the legislature, present and future, and the First Amendment. We're a citizen legislature. Most of us have other jobs. I hope we'll not get to the point where legislators start weighing their votes, worrying if they push the wrong button that their own present or future employment might be in jeopardy. We can't do our job if every vote, every floor speech is viewed through the lens of what if. Again, this is one person's view, one of 12. As I said earlier, I'm proud myself of the work of OPEGA, and I'm proud of the work of this committee and respect the views of each and every one of my colleagues, all of whom are also struggling to do the right thing. Further comment? Representative Kruger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I too want to salute staff. I think the OPEGA staff did an outstanding job, and it was a tightrope at times, and I think that it was well trod. Well trodden? I'll have to look for that. The role of this committee is to shine a light. The actions of Governor LePage as they relate to will-hinckley and Speaker Eves raise serious questions about our government and political system. We had before us questions about the abuse of public office and taxpayer dollars and allegations that threats were made and carried out against an organization for at-risk youth to exact retribution against a political rival. These are questions that could shake the faith of Maine people in their government. We owe it to them to get to the bottom of this matter. If an elected official is able to use the power of his office to punish a lawmaker for his voting record, who among us is safe? Are any of us as lawmakers? What about everyday Mainers and independent organizations? They need to be able to go about their business without worrying about crossing the wrong person in power. As elected officials, our consciences and our constituents, not the fear of intimidation and retribution, must be the guide for our actions. These serious concerns move some of our legislative colleagues, Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, to request an investigation. We as a committee unanimously determined that OPEGA should investigate. That strong bipartisan vote showed how seriously we take our duties. We remain as committed to them when others try to undermine this effort and even attack our work and mission. OPEGA produced an excellent impartial report that spelled out what happened. We now know with complete certainty that the governor did use state dollars to threaten will-hinckley because it hired Speaker Eves, and that funds were withheld and restored only after Speaker Eves was fired from his new post. Now, with our fact-finding mission drawing to a close, it's going to be up to others outside this committee to decide what comes next. But I believe this investigation and this report can be valuable tools, and I urge the legislature to take action so nothing of this sort ever happens again. And that's what's needed to ensure that the people of Maine can have confidence in our system.